Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of the Middleborough School Committee. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Again, as we've always been able to do, if you want to put any comment or question that you have under what you're watching, we'll be able to see it, and we'll try to address those questions one at a time. First up on my agenda is reports from school committee members. Does anyone wish to report anything? Seeing no one, I will move on. Next on our agenda is we are going to go to the superintendent's report. So I'll go to Brian. Brian, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I have a number of items tonight leading up to our athletic department update, which was continued from last week. First of all, with regard to the reopening plans for the 2020-2021 school year, school committee subcommittee, negotiation subcommittee, myself, Dr. Melanie Gates, and our attorney, Rebecca Bryant, continue to negotiate in good faith with three of our unions, trying to determine the best way to come up with agreements with regard to the changes that are present in this year in particular. So we're coming up with a 2020-2021 MOA or MOU, Memorandum of Agreement or Memorandum of Understanding, excuse me. And we continue to do that, again, in good faith. We made a good deal of progress, I think, this week. I think the subcommittee might agree, Tuesday and Thursday. We're pleased to announce, and we've come up with certain portions of the agreement that have allowed us to move forward with certain staffing decisions, many of which will be announced tomorrow in email and letter form out to faculty about remote assignments and accommodations, et cetera. So that will be news for those folks tomorrow. Our teachers, I met with our principals this afternoon and let them know exactly who they can be expecting in their buildings. Some switches over from people that had multiple certifications at different buildings. And so there have been some movements so as to accommodate folks' requests, medical or otherwise. So we continue to work on that. Secondly, we have a professional development plan, a 10-day professional development plan that continues to be developed through Dr. Gates and the faculty, the staff and administration of each building, so that they continue to outline those 10 days and what they will look like. The first date, August 31st, is part of the first day is to accommodate a negotiation or the negotiations team for the teachers to let the teachers know what's been going on. So they have an hour to talk to, every year they have an hour to talk to the Middlebury Education Association on our first day. They have a second hour this year because we normally have a 2-day teacher orientation called Staff Strong. And this year we only made it one because of social distancing, et cetera. So they're going to have an hour with those new folks. So our convocation, we plan to begin at about 10:15 with a generally a welcome speech from me. Then at 11 o'clock on that day, August 31st, Monday, we'll have basically a PPE 101, a course in protection equipment for COVID, and offer up and let the folks in the district know exactly what we have on hand for them in terms of protective equipment. And we've also, that's part of negotiations, we're also talking about possibly some additional safety equipment to get for some folks. I know that folks out there are interested in the cohorts, and when those cohorts announcements will take place, I want folks to realize that it's been a bit of a painstaking process. So to try to accommodate parents' requests and childcare requests and things such as that, we feel we have them in place and they're strong enough to send out. And we hope to announce those on Monday, this coming Monday, August 31st. So that is our plan to announce cohorts this coming Monday, August 31st. I don't see that we'd have any delay in that. Although I will not guarantee for Monday, I'm going to certainly encourage our principals to make sure that all goes out all at once. And I feel that we have agreement on part of all the administrators that we're prepared to do so. So that will obviously be my ask, and would like to do that, obviously. So that is the sort of the major news going on with COVID-19, and the accommodations need to be made for everything, including faculty and staff and everyone. And we continue to do those things and do everything we can to reopen in a safe manner coming up with our students on September 15th, our students in grades 1 through 12 in our postgraduate program. And tonight you will make a decision as to what those other dates look like for pre-K and kindergarten. So I then will move on now to the, if there are no questions, I'll certainly entertain questions.
So
I
Brian,
think there's a
again,
question in the comment box.
yeah, I was going to ask that question. Was that you'll be the cohorts will also be going out for remote?
Well,
learning.
the remotes are the remotes. So those folks that are going out to remote, those teacher announcements are not going to be made on Monday. We're just announcing cohorts on Monday. We will not be announcing teacher names right away. Those will come out later. As far as the remote teachers, those will be part of the teacher announcements and what students are assigned to those. And I think that's important to note that, and that's not any different than what every student will get. So the remote students will find out when the students who will be in the building in the hybrid plan will also find out. So, and I want to assure people of that. So our next is we had a policy subcommittee meeting the other day with Meg Janess, Teresa Farley. I was also in attendance, and Dr. Gates was also in attendance. And we talked about a couple of policies. And one is the face covering policy. And you have your third read tonight. So I would defer to the school committee for discussion on this. We did make a bit of a change last week, a recommended change. And I know that Meg Janess could not be here tonight. So perhaps Ms. Farley might have a comment or two on the meeting held the other day with regarding to the policy on face covering.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Lynch. We really wanted to focus on face coverings because we felt that that was something that a lot of people were worried about and wondering about. And so we decided to pull Miss Magnesco in, the nurse coordinator, and just ask her what her thoughts were on the gaiters regarding all the science behind it. And we felt that based on her recommendation that we would be fine and okay with having gaiters as part of the face coverings, but not bandanas. So the reason for that is that bandanas only cover the nose and the mouth, but there's air coming out, whereas the gaiter covers your whole neck and can be pulled up over your mouth and your nose. So based on her recommendations, we felt that that was appropriate.
Okay. Any questions from the subcommittee? Mr. Oakley.
Yeah, it looked great to me. I just had one question, and I don't know if this is a little too lawyery. Of maybe I need to take that cap off, but
you're a lawyer now, Mr.
I guess I don't know. But page 1, the second set of bullets, it just says there's a sentence preceding it that says will not be required when appropriate social distancing is enforced, and then it has a colon, and I wondered. That sentence standing alone almost sounds like it's just open, when social distancing is enforced, but then it lists 4 scenarios below that. And is it just understood that those 4 scenarios are the entirety of what that sentence is talking about? Or does that sentence open us up to kind of like all sorts of scenarios where social distancing is enforced?
Mr. Lynch, I might defer to you on that. I feel as though it would be those 4 scenarios, but
I would say that's the all-inclusive list, and
right.
if we want to take the colon away and make that one complete sentence, we certainly can do that, Mr. Oakley.
No, I'm suggesting I'm saying less openness would be better. So if you guys feel like the colon suggests that is the complete universe of circumstances intended, then that's good with me. I just wanted to check on that.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you. That's all I had. I think it looks like a great policy. Thanks for your work on it.
So any other questions about that in particular? Mr. Rowe.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just regarding the policy with gators, I know it's relatively new research. It's only one report that's really out there. It's not a lot, but as they do more research, hopefully it remains, that they're okay. But if something did come up that they're not okay, could we go back and revisit this policy at that time?
Yeah, so just to be clear, so if D puts out requirements, we would automatically follow the requirements as we do. If Geese put out guidelines, we as a school committee could send those guidelines back to the subcommittee. So it's like anything else. It depends on how they bring it out. Basically, right ahead.
I was just going to say, it says right in the language for all the policies, and we made sure that Mr. Lynch and I and Ms. Janess spoke about this, was that there is room for change at any time, suggested of, issues coming up, or we feel we need to pull back a little bit. The language is in there that we could make those changes fairly quickly if we needed to. I'm correct, right, Mr. Lynch?
That is correct.
Yes.
Yeah, and the other piece is if the state makes a requirement change, then we can do it in one reading. We don't have to go through a three reading process.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Farley. Thank you, Mr. Young.
Thank you.
Any other question? And seeing none, Chair will entertain a motion to pass the face covering policy with the final reading.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Oakley.
I just wanted to say there's a part in there that says this policy will remain in place until rescinded by the school committee, and I think that will be a really nice day when we get to rescind this policy.
This is so true. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Mr. Oakley.
Aye.
Mr. Stevens. Ms. Farley.
Aye.
Mr. Rowe.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We pass that policy. Brian, one more question came in about the start of the school year that I think is important. Do you have an idea when bus assignments will go out?
Well, once we have the cohorts listed, which we have now, and we'll send them off to the bus company, and then the bus company will establish the routes based on the cohorts. So as soon as we have those back from the bus company, we need to give them some time. As soon as we have those back from the bus company, we'll announce them, like I said, as soon as we get them back. We do have to give them some time. We're fortunate that we have Tracy Donahue, who's down there working for First Student, and she is a diligent worker. She has the routes already. She has the students on each bus. Now we're looking at what it looks like with half the students on the bus, and do we have to make adjustments if one bus is particularly more heavy than another? If we have to make adjustments with the buses, somebody that may have rode bus 4, last year might be riding bus 16 this year just because of numbers. So that's we know we have half the population coming in. We're hoping we won't have to make too many changes because that just confuses folks. So, but we really want to make sure that we don't have more than 27 students on those 83 passenger buses and 25 or so on the 77 passenger buses.
And I don't have any other questions right now. Mr. Lynch, if you want to go back to the superintendent's report.
I certainly will. The next policy is the policy on COVID-19, and this is a second read for you folks. And again, a policy that we reviewed the other day in our meeting. It was Monday, I believe, Ms. Farley.
Yes.
And that was so. This is the policy that basically makes this year exclusive. Mr. Oakley mentioned earlier that our hopes is that we don't have to, we can erase these policies at some point in the near future. But this is particular to COVID-19 with adjustments to time on learning and the school calendar, the 170 days and the student assignment to schools, the need that might occur for that, promotion and retention, and things such as staff positions and moving people around. We have the ask came from the committee to go back because this made reference to a number of policies in each piece. We went back to make sure all these policies are in our policy manual. So Ms. Gagnon here in my office, my administrative assistant, was able to do that. And you have before you basically a policy that sort of encompasses everything, all of the changes that need to be made this year in specific or in particular with regard to changes made necessary by the pandemic. So, and again, I would refer to Ms. Farley for her comments or input.
Well, because it's a second read, I think it would be important for everyone to take a look, but I think certainly most importantly that you have that right, Mr. Lynch, to make changes as staffing as necessary. I think that people need to understand that we're in situations that, just don't look the same today as they looked yesterday. So that understanding that you have that right is huge for people, I think.
Yeah, and those need to be considered. We need to consider the provisions of the current collective bargaining agreements, which we certainly are doing as part of the process that I mentioned earlier. So, we wouldn't make any universal changes without agreement from the associations.
Correct.
Any other questions? This is a second reading. Mr. Oakley.
I just wanted to ask, I noticed in this latest version that there's a few sections that are gone from when we first had it, and it was class size, attendance, and local graduation requirements. And I just wanted to know from someone who doesn't look at policies all day, what was the
with regard to
reasoning
class
behind
size, there
those?
are some collective bargaining agreements that limit class size, and we do not have that. So that would not be part of this policy. That's why it was taken out. The other references you made, Mr. Oakley, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. It was section, or rather policy JH on attendance, and then policy IKF on local graduation requirements.
File JH is in here under attendance. That is included on the next to last page on attendance versus participation in events.
Okay, that's great. Sorry, I was looking in the wrong section.
Okay. And your final concern was?
It was the local graduation requirements.
I think that's covered under graduation requirements, and I'm not sure why that's not in here, because that is required for us to change. I'll certainly look at this with Ann Gagnon and again, my administrative assistant who handles the policy book, and make sure that we have something in there, because we do have to change some graduation requirements as per these guidelines that we can, because like at the high school, we've basically removed all electives to make the schedule work. So, and credits will change, and the year's credits will change. So we'll need to make our own local changes in requirements.
It could be too, Brian, that there's some graduation requirements that will require a school committee vote. So, for example, school committee set the policy on community service as requirement of graduation, which is not a normal state requirement of graduation. So I believe the superintendent has the right to change the normal state requirements for graduation,
Yep.
but we need to vote to allow any local piece that we put into place because we were the ones who manufactured that.
Correct. Go with that.
Correct.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions?
Just wanted to say that another basic premise of this policy is to ensure the safety and health of all students, faculty, and staff, and all persons who may come in contact with them or in the building, provide the most effective educational services possible, authorize changes to operating protocols as needed, to open and operate schools effectively from various venues and platforms, conduct the district business and operational functions of the district as efficiently as possible, allow the superintendent and staff to act quickly to carry out a, quote, back to school plan, and facilitate the reestablishment of a safe and productive school day and year. So basically that's the premise of this policy, and I do think we need it in place. There's no doubt about it, but that is your decision next week.
So any other comments or questions? So this requires no vote. It will just move on to the third reading for next week. So my suggestion is if anybody has any comments or changes they'd like to see, I would send it to the subcommittee just to see if they have to review it, okay? All right, Mr. Lynch, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. We're going to move on to the school calendar for kindergarten and pre-K, the first day. It's not something we have touched on. We didn't touch on it last week. And I want folks out there to know who have been sort of frustrated with calendar dates, and that this is a process that we really started, I believe, last November on this calendar because of the high school building. So we have spent a good deal of time on this calendar. But through Jeremy Gobiel, the principal of the Early Childhood Center, His recommendation, and I support the recommendation, is that we have a 2-day kindergarten orientation because of the numbers and because of social distancing of Wednesday to the September 16th and Thursday, September 17th for kindergarten, dividing that group in half that's coming into the school. And our first day of preschool would be the 21st Monday of September 2020. Those are his recommendations, and I support them, and I'll be willing to discuss this with you. And again, that 2-day orientation for kindergarten is different than usual because of the circumstances regarding the pandemic and social distancing.
Anyone want to make the recommendation, make the motion just to start the discussion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Teresa, you had your hand up.
Yes, I just thought it would be great for the public to hear why the Wednesday, Thursday, and why that made sense. So for students in cohort 2, Wednesday would be their day in the building, and for students in cohort 3, their day in the building would be that Thursday. So each of those groups would get a chance to be in the building and then start the following week, really, with their cohorts. So it should be clear, but I just kind of want to make sure that that was said.
And we would have school for that cohort 3 on the 18th also. So,
any further discussion?
Correct, right.
All right. Seeing no other discussion, there's a motion on the table to finish the calendar off, hopefully once and for all, so we never have to mention this calendar again.
we say that every time, Mr. Chair.
I know I do, but sometimes we just have to dream. It's like when the roof of the mech went on my agenda, never to come off. I would hope and dream that it would go off, and eventually it did. Mr. Oakley, your vote.
Aye.
Mr. Stevens. Aye. Ms. Farley.
Aye.
Mr. Rowe.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you.
Next on my agenda, Mr. Chair, is as Erin Doak puts it, it's not an update, it's a pup date.
Right.
We have some good news, actually. It's regarding the therapy animal, the therapy dog that she came before the committee with regard to bringing into the HBB school. And she sent along a note over to me and CC'd it around, and it's in your Dropbox. It says, "Good afternoon. I'm delighted to let you know the McLean Hospital will provide a one-time grant of $8,000 to the Middleborough Public Schools Family Resource Center to enhance classroom-based emotional support services, specifically the needs assistance dog." So the previous email with regard to Erin Doak being accepted into the program, she submitted her application online to the Needs World Class Service Dogs. After a 2.5 hour interview on August 17th, she was accepted into the Needs Assistance Dog Program. They put a lot of effort into making sure Mrs. Doak is matched with the right dog, not only for her job, but also for her home life also. The time until a match is found is unknown, but in the meantime, Ms. Doak will be meeting with needs supervisors, clients fundraising to explore, develop the plan to raise the money, that $8,000. So she was looking for to put a plan together to raise an $8,000 donation that basically is the cost of raising one of these pups and training one of these pups. And the update this evening, as I said, is that the McLean Hospital here in town and locally has decided to make an $8,000 grant to the Middleborough Public Schools Family Resource Center to basically provide for this $8,000. So we certainly thank McLean Hospital. They continue to be a partner in this community. They provide the interface service that is for the entire community of Middleborough. We have a 3-year grant with them that they provided, upwards of $45,000. So we continue to thank them for their partnership with the Middleborough Public Schools, and this is just another great example of their continued, interest and assistance for Middleborough Public Schools and the students therein, and the community also. So she's looking to get a dog. She has a dog now that she's training, and she brought the dog by. I know she's brought the dog by HBB. It's a nice dog, and she's not sure if that's the dog that will be hers. But that dog has to go through that testing, as they mentioned. And the dog she had recently that she brought over didn't pass, and is with a nice family now, but didn't pass the test. So the tests are quite stringent and strict in terms of what these dogs have to be able to do and respond to adults. So looking forward to the next step. But very thankful to McLean Hospital and thankful to Aaron Doak for sort of carrying this light and this torch for this program. In spite of everything that's going on, the kids more than ever, I think, will need the assistance of folks who are going to help them and animals that are going to help them. So we look forward to meeting a new pup, and that's the pup date for this evening.
That's excellent. And I would also add, as you said, Mr. Lynch, but McLean has been a good community neighbor, not only for the school system, but the community as a whole. And I hope at some point to ask them to come in person. And so we can sort of honor them by thanking them in person someday.
And that'd be great. And I also want to point out the fact that our point person in this has been Megan Quirk, our Family Resource Center director. She is the one that is the responsible person for knocking on doors. She writes the grants. She makes the phone calls. She knocks on the doors, and she's not afraid to stick out her hand for the Middlebury Public Schools and say, "Listen, can you help? Can you help us in any way?" And I think with the positive interaction between the two organizations, I think we can hopefully count on their partnership for years to come. And I think it's facilitated by Megan Quirk, so I do give her credit also. So
excellent.
And now we have a sports update with Ryan Sylvia. You heard him last week, and he's back.
Welcome back, Ryan.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me back. My update is really a summary of some of the kind of requests and recommendations that I made last week. I have some tweaks and some new information, but kind of hoping to move forward and get our athletics registration up and running next week potentially. But really some of the kind of updates that aren't just reviewing some of the items from last week. The South Shore League athletic directors, made up of the 10 schools that we're a member of, have settled on schedules for the most part in all sports that are allowable in the fall, with the exception of football and cheer and unified. That includes sub-varsity sports, mainly junior varsity. Middleborough is a little bit unique in the sense that we're one of the only other schools in the league that has multiple freshman teams. So I'll talk about that in a minute. And then also we're a little bit unique in that we have a separate league for our middle school program. So that's something a little bit different. So really the South Shore League is focused on our varsity schedules and junior varsity schedules. The varsity schedules will end up looking like almost a full season, somewhere in the range of 10 to 13 regular season games, and we've designed a kind of South Shore League only double elimination or single elimination tournament situation, depending on the sport. So that is almost completely done and ready to be posted. The sub-varsity aspect of that is they are currently scheduled to play as they usually do on the same dates and locations as the varsity. So, for example, and there's a lot of variables that need to be considered in here. For example, typically boys and girls soccer, the JV team would travel. So if we're talking boys soccer, the JV team would travel with the varsity team. Well, we're not going to be able to put two teams on the same bus. So one of the strategies that we discussed was a shuttle, meaning the varsity team would play first. If we're going to Carver High School for a boys soccer game, the varsity team gets on the bus. They go to the soccer game. The bus comes back, picks up the JV team, brings the JV team to Carver to play after the varsity game. Varsity team finishes, gets on the bus, comes back to school, and then the bus turns around again and goes back to get the team. So that's one scenario. Another scenario is the idea of two buses going to a location if they have two fields available. So that's just an example. I mean, I could go through all different scenarios, but trying to work the schedule with the budget and with transportation and guidelines for cleaning and sanitizing buses and touched surfaces and all those types of things. So that's a little bit of an update. We've kind of got into the weeds a little bit with the schedule and what it's actually going to look like and how feasible it is, and with the transportation. Another piece for Middleborough and Carver, at least at this point, those two communities are that we are both under a high-risk Triple E situation. So staggering games might be a little bit more difficult. We may need to talk about one game starting. Typically, we have a 4 o'clock start. Those games, as we get later into October, the first game may need to start at 3 o'clock or even earlier if we do have to stagger them, if we don't have the ability to use 2 fields and have the games going on at the same time. So things like that that I'm looking at. Otherwise, really, it's just the summary from last week with, the current based on the current guidance and the understanding that new guidance could come out and all the different variables that these things could change, but looking to allow students in the remote learning and the hybrid model to be able to participate in athletics, looking to offer athletic opportunities at all levels and publicize that in our registration as far as middle school sports and sub-varsity, with the understanding that those schedules could be very limited. And that includes the JV teams and the sub-varsity teams. There's a chance that, typically they would mirror the varsity schedule. Well, in this climate, some of those games, a school may not be able to get a second bus, or they may not be able to have another field available. So the idea right now is that the priority would go to the varsity teams, and we make every effort to have a full junior varsity schedule and a full junior varsity or sub-varsity game schedule. And if they don't have a game, then obviously they'll be practicing and working on skills and development and all those types of things. But the idea is to try to offer as much as we can and then work through the challenges as we go. And I do expect that the sub-varsity, if the varsity is playing a 12 or 14 or 16 game schedule, depending on how far they go in the tournament, I would expect the JV is going to be not too far behind there. Maybe a 10 or 12 game schedule, maybe an 8 game schedule, depending on which schools offer the sport. The concept of practice only sports, so the high risk sports, football, competitive cheer, and unified basketball, looking to make a decision on whether or not we're going to allow that practice opportunity in the regular fall season. So if approved, there would be a practice season for football, cheer, and potentially unified basketball. And what that looks like in my talking with coaches is the fall, for example, the fall football season, or the fall 2 football season that would happen in February, March, and April is only a 9-week season compared to a typical 14-week football season. So the idea would be for the football players and coaches to be allowed a 4 to 5 week practice season with limited, under the current guidelines. And then once they run, almost like a spring ball type of situation. And then once they run through, and the same thing for the cheerleaders. And once they get through that 4 or 5 weeks, then they pick up with their traditional or their actual season in fall 2 to total a 14-week season. The next one is if guidance shifts for us to not allow competition, we would want to still encourage our teams to practice and work on skill development throughout the season so their seasons wouldn't end, and potentially do some inter-squad competition. One of the other questions that came up was the out-of-season coaching based on the MIA rule change and the need for us to develop a policy by the athletic department and approved by the building principal. And if we approve this out-of-season coaching policy that needs to be developed, there would be no stipend for out-of-season coaching. That would be voluntary work. But part of developing the policy needs to be that if we're going to have out-of-season practice type situations, they have to be scheduled in a structured way with registration. Obviously, no fees for those situations, but that's why the policy needs to be worked and developed on our end prior to making that decision. And I believe my final piece here is a couple more. The user fee recommendation, which is to maintain the current user fee, and basically just have some guidelines that everybody understands ahead of time. If the sport is started and competition is played, there would be no refund, and the possibility of setting a date of October 1st, as once the season starts and games are played, then the user fees is collected and not refundable. If a sport's moved to the floating season because the season ended, the competition's ended, but it was able to move to that later season, then that fee would carry over to that season. If the season's reduced to practice only or intramurals, there would be no refund. So in other words, we can't play games anymore because of the state guidelines, but we're still going to continue to practice. There would be no refund for that because our coaches are still going to be out there working with our teams. If a season's terminated prior to the first competition, so say we start in a few weeks and we get shut down, then that fee would carry over to the next athletic season within this current school year. And if a student athlete decides not to compete in another season throughout the school year, then that's what at the time that we would issue refunds prior to July 1, the end of the year. The other piece was transportation, which I talked about. There's going to be significant adjustments to the transportation schedule and potentially the budget, depending on number of teams and the capacity limitations. The goal would be to get creative with how we do this, given that there's going to be a limited number of games, so there'll be less overall transportation or events, but potentially more mileage if we're shuttling buses, and potentially more buses on any given day. So the idea would be to stay within our budget limitations and also maintain a positive experience and a good number of games for our team.
Ryan, one question that I have regarding transportation, not so much the money. You and I both know that we've run into issues trying to find buses on certain days.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I know, you try to put out the schedule whenever possible. You give it to the transportation. On days we know there is going to be issues, and it could be we have multiple sports heading off campus. Is the focus really going to be on varsity over sub-varsity at that point, if it comes down to not enough buses?
That's the mindset right now. Is the focus would be on varsity over sub-varsity. My hope is that we're able to do it. Our bus company from an athletic standpoint has been great. They typically have 4 to 5 buses available on any given day, and it's very rare that we have more than that going out. And what we've done with the schedule, because it's really tight within the league, all the schedules have been recreated. So boys soccer always plays on the same day. Field hockey is always going to play on the same day. Cross country is always going to be on the same day. So girls and boys cross country, I believe, are going to be at opposite sites because of just the numbers and transportation and things like that. So there's a lot of thought going into this to make it work. And I think we're in a good place where it's going to be able to happen. But like I said, there has to be a little bit of understanding from our community and our families that the season's going to look different, and a lot different, and there might not be as many games as we're used to, especially at the sub-varsity and middle school level.
One other thing, Brian, just for the community to understand, can you talk a little about attendance at sporting events as the guidelines are currently?
Yes. So currently with indoor sporting events in the fall, we really only have volleyball. And that is actually a kind of a hot topic even within the league. There's a potential for us to look to move that to fall too. The league's kind of split on it because the capacity limitations are you can't go more than 40% of your gym capacity, and people have to be able to be physically distanced at that minimum 6 feet with masks in order to have the event and to have spectators indoors. There's also some concerns with when you have a sport like volleyball, multiple teams coming into the facility. So, for example, we have 3 volleyball teams, so that's 3 different sets of kids and coaches that are coming in. So you have to do some cleaning and disinfecting in between games, where usually you're just one team, the freshman team finishes it up, they're off, they head home, the JV team comes on, and you just roll right through it. So there has been some talk for indoor facilities of having no spectators, and that way we are able to bring all the teams into the gym at the same time, and it's really just the coaches, officials, and teams that are going through those games for inside. Outdoors, as long as our venue can support physical distancing guidelines of 6 feet between people that aren't in the same household, and spacing each other out in the bleachers, then I expect that we're going to be okay. I would be working with our town board of health just to have them take a look at our facility and kind of give us some recommendations on exactly what kind of signage. We kind of know exactly what we're dealing with already, but just have them look at it and say, maybe we should have some signage here. These are the kind of the spaces we should avoid, that type of thing.
Does anyone have any other questions for Ryan? Otherwise, what I'm going to do is go one by one over the votes he needs from us to make sure we don't miss anything. So any general questions for Ryan? Greg, please, Mr. Rowe.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Ryan, I know some sports, the rules and adaptations are coming out on September 1st. Is that going to be for most fall sports? So September 1st, 2nd, we should have an idea about all from staggered starts and no heading, right, and all that kind of stuff.
Right. So we've been told that, and these modifications to the rules of the games have already been submitted, supposedly to the board of directors at the MIA. And we've been told that September 1st is kind of when they put the stamp on it and release it to the public, including the athletic directors. We don't really get an early look at it. That's kind of the reasoning why I've waited until now to post registration. So I have September 4th slated. It's a Friday as our registration open. And based off of those guidelines, as a league and as a school district, we may look at it and go, you know what, maybe we should push this to fall too, or maybe we should kind of make this last minute change before we open registration, because we don't want to play the game this way, or it doesn't make sense to do it this way.
Other questions? Then I'm going to go through each one, and Ryan, if I missed anything, you can yell at me. But the first guideline that we have to Chair will entertain a motion to allow remote students to participate in Middleborough sports. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. And Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but the guidance is that since the students are remote, we have to vote to allow them to participate.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other comments? Mr. Stevens.
What would be the reasons to not allow them? Like, I guess I don't understand.
I don't think anyone's
why they're not allowed.
What the state is saying is because they are not on campus, they cannot participate unless the school committee allows them to. So we're just taking this vote to make them able to participate. Now, clearly, it's up to parents if they choose to have their child participate, but it's just creating that opportunity.
But they would have to follow all the same
COVID
guidelines and everything.
Part of it is, I think the reason they're requiring a vote, I think, is because the potential for mixing of cohorts within teams.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, if I could.
Sure.
This discussion started this summer from the Commissioner of Education and the governor in their efforts to get as many students in school as possible, and their idea that everybody should be in school if they're otherwise healthy and could be in school. And it went through a number of different discussions. And I think that's where this original guideline came out, that school committees, like you voted on the reopening plan, are to vote on these plans as far as athletics, so that you have local control over these issues. So, but that's sort of where that came from. The original conversation with the commissioner when he was first asked the question was, no, I want all kids in school. So, but that was back in July, and obviously things have changed since. However, the guidance that came out did say it is local control, and that's why you're voting.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any further comment? Then all those in favor, I got to do it remotely. I got to do it roll call. So the motion is to allow remote students to participate. Mr. Oakley.
Aye.
Mr. Stevens.
Aye.
Ms. Farley.
Aye.
Ms. Rowe. Mr. Rowe.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So that's that piece, Ryan. I'm going to take the middle freshman JV and varsity piece this way. Chair would entertain a motion to allow the athletic director to file middle school waivers in all sports in which he believes there to be a low number of high school students. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? So just so everyone understands the normal procedure, Ryan does this every year for certain sports in which he knows we are low in numbers. It allows the 8th graders to participate in the lowest level that we offer. All these folks have to go to the high school principal, to the superintendent, and to myself. And then we are created on a chain with the MIA when they either allow or deny them. So this is a piece that we do every year. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Mr. Oakley?
Aye.
Mr. Stevens?
Aye.
Ms. Farley?
Aye.
Mr. Rowe?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. I guess the second piece would be, since we do have middle school athletics, the chair would entertain a motion to allow the athletic director to make the determination whether that is amongst other schools or intramurally based on numbers and based on the leagues.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
So again, for discussion, some programs we have intramurally, some programs compete against other schools. This would just be allowing Ryan to assess what's going on and make that determination based on what other schools are doing. If he can't find other schools to participate, then it will be an intramural program, right, Ryan?
Correct.
Okay. Any further comment? Okay. Mr. Oakley.
Aye.
Mr. Rowe.
Aye.
Ms. Farley.
Aye.
Mr. Stevens.
Aye.
And I vote aye. The next would be to allow the high-risk sports to practice for the fall season. And they would be allowed to practice for 4 to 5 weeks, equaling the full season that would occur in fall 2. This again applies to football, competitive cheer, and United basketball. It would give the opportunity for kids to practice and hopefully play when March and April came around. But it's sort of a start. Do I have that motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
Discussion. Ryan, I just have one question and to make sure, to clarification on. It is 4 to 5 weeks. Given, for example, right now the fall season would run September through November, if you will. A coach could make a determination to start his practice in October, for example.
Yes. So we're kind of working through that now. Like football is kind of looking at 2 scenarios, doing maybe 1 week on, 1 week off to equal until they get to the 5 weeks. So they would spread it out, or the option of going like 4 weeks in a row and then being done with it.
Okay. Now, one other question, Ryan, too. It's the 4 or 5 weeks in total. So let's say, for example, as we've seen in the past, we get a week of bad rain. Could the coach essentially cancel practice that week and just continue with the overall 5 weeks over the, following next week, just adding on?
Yes, and technically by rule we could run practice all season long. It doesn't have to be the 4 to 5 weeks. That's just kind of what I came up with the coaches, because it becomes the equivalent of what would have been their total season. So if they don't do anything in the fall, they're essentially their season's cut short. So they're doing the same amount of work if they do 4 to 5 weeks in the traditional fall season combined with the fall too.
And I would also add it makes it fair stipend wise too, because we're not asking them to do 2 full seasons. We're essentially asking them to do the equivalent time wise. Correct, Ryan?
Exactly. Yes.
Greg, you had a question? Greg Rowe?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Ryan, you alluded to this earlier, but it sounds like you will be scheduling this out of season practice, just like you would a soccer practice or volleyball practice or anything else, to keep it fair for all students.
Just so I understand the question,
you're scheduling the 4 to 5 weeks is up to you to schedule. It's not just.
Correct. Yeah, I would not give. It would be in collaboration with the coaches and potentially even our building principal, to make sure that with everything we're doing within the school that it fits and works, and with field space and that type of thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Seeing that allows the practice in the fall season for the high risk sports. Mr. Oakley.
Aye.
Mr. Rowe.
Aye.
Ms. Farley.
Aye.
Stevens.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So Ryan, as far as I'm concerned, as far as your decision to continue intramural sports, as long as it falls within the Board of Health guidelines, I don't think we have to approve that. If you're going to change it, for example, if you're going to change a JV because you can't find JV and just make it intramural, that's really up to you.
Okay.
Does anyone have a differing opinion on that? Because I don't think we really need to, if he's the one establishing the schedule, and if he can't establish a schedule, by the same token too, in my mind, if you had one program that wanted to play us and only one, you could still have your intramural league, and maybe the champion could play that other team, their intramural champions. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm envisioning at the middle school level, potentially. An intramural type program where towards the end of the season or at certain points in the season, maybe a local game with one of our Massasoit League members, a couple of games. Ideally we have a full season, but with the low level of middle school programs, it might be unrealistic. So I picture maybe a few games in those sports.
Okay. So yeah, that would, and as far as I'm concerned, that would be up to you to make the determination about, and it wouldn't necessarily require school committee approval, if everybody's agrees to that. The next item that we would have to vote for is to allow out of season coaching based on the MIA rule change. Can I have a motion on that?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
So again, this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, this would allow, for example, the football coach could not coach football of any of his players in an out of season. So generally speaking, because football is being played in March and April, he could not run a practice in fall normally. Am I correct in that assumption, Ryan?
Under the previous rule, that's correct. Yes. No coach of any sport would be able to have contact with their players outside of their regular season.
So the MIA has made a rule change that allows that to take place. And so we're just allowing our coaches to do that.
Yes, and a lot of this came from the fact that the spring teams last year, so our seniors have obviously graduated and moved on, but some of those underclassmen that missed out on their spring season, this would allow us as an athletic department to potentially structure some activities for them in the fall or the winter. But it's at the discretion. The way the rule is written is at the discretion of the building principal. So I talked to Mr. Brannigan about this, and some of our coaches, and it's going to be very important that we put strict guidelines in place for our coaches to follow, and these things have to be scheduled through the athletic department and in collaboration with our principal. And it may be something where as everybody knows, our administrators and teachers are going to be very busy with everything in terms of academics. So this may be something that we, whatever the policy is, it needs to be very well written, and coaches need to have a good understanding of what we're trying to do. So just that's an important piece.
Any other questions about that particular piece? And again, this is allowing coaches to coach out of season. Again, this would also mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, for example, the basketball coach this year could run a weightlifting program for his players or her players.
That's correct. And actually anything strength and conditioning related has always been allowed. So coaches, that's the contact that coaches would be allowed to have regardless of this rule. But under this rule, the basketball coach could technically run an open gym practice that's within the guidelines. So right now there's no scrimmaging allowed for basketball, but they could have an open gym where they're shooting free throws and working independently and that type of thing.
And that would obviously also be based on the fact that the priority, for example, to the gym would go to in-season sports.
Exactly. And we may even take it a little further and say that in-season sports and athletes, we may not be permitted to participate in out-of-season practices, because we don't want to put a student athlete in a position where they're a 3-sport athlete and 3 different coaches are asking them to attend 3 different practices a week. So that's what I mean about where I'm collaborating with our league and other athletic directors to make sure this policy, when it's finalized, makes sense for the students and the coaches and everybody.
And if at the end, when the policy is developed, you could just get us a copy so we could see it, that would be great. So
Absolutely.
Any questions about this piece? So again, I'll move to a roll call vote. Mr. Oakley?
Aye.
Mr. Stevens?
Aye.
Ms. Farley?
Aye.
Mr. Rowe?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. The next piece I'm going to read, and I want to make it clear to everybody this way. I'm just going to read what Ryan has asked us for a policy about fees and fee structuring. I would say that Ryan will send this and make it aware of every parent prior to signing up, okay? But I just want to lay it out this way. Chair would entertain a motion to allow the current user fee structure, which is $175 per sport, $350 individual cap, and a $450 family cap. If a sport is started and competition played, there will be no refund. Possibility of a set date for October 1st. If a sport is moved to the floating season, just so everyone understands what that is. For example, if there was a problem during basketball season, the athletic director, and as long as the other athletic people were participating, they could take basketball and move it to the floating season. They're allowed to do that under the new rules. If for floating season, the fee would carry over to that season. If a season is reduced to practice/intramural, there would be no refund. If a season is terminated prior to the first competition, the fee would carry over to the next athletic season. If the season is terminated prior to the first competition and the individual chooses not to participate in any other athletic season in the 2021 school year, the refund will be issued prior to July 1st, 2021. And then there would be also an intramural fee structure at the middle school, which is if a program runs 5 days per week intramural, the fee will be adjusted accordingly to $100 per sport. Any questions about that? It was written in the policy that Ryan had sent to us. I'm just using the dates. Ryan was kind enough to put out dates for us, so I'm going to use those dates, Ryan. Obviously, I'm fine if you need to change them for some reason based on something, but we'll use it for that point. Any questions about that? Ryan, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just had a comment, just a kind of a clarification. The usual Nichols Middle School user fee is $25, and it's a little bit different in the sense that that's $25 paid every season for flag football in the fall, floor hockey in the winter, kickball. So those were typically only 2 or 3 days a week, and one of our teachers that runs that program structured that schedule. This is a lot different in the sense that we would be having our usual coaches running those programs 5 days a week as they would a regular team, except they would not be playing games. So when we put out the boys and girls soccer schedule for Nichols Middle School, if that becomes that program is going to be run as it always has been. But if it becomes intramural because there's no games to be played, or there's only a couple of games because we can't find competitions, then that fee structure goes to $100. It's not the $25 intramural fee, and that's because there's more days per week and we have to pay coaches.
Any further questions about that? Seeing none, Cheryl, we'll go for a vote on the fee structure. Mr. Oakley. Mr. Rowe.
Aye.
Ms. Farley.
Aye.
Mr. Stevens.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Ryan, there's one more thing I just want to bring up because I saw a question, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. On days when students during the hybrid model are home or remote students from home, in order to participate in sports, they will need to transport themselves to school.
As of now, yes, that's correct. And that's really the only way I think we have of getting them to school is to have their own transportation.
Right, because just so everyone understands, the way the bus structure runs is as soon as they transport high school kids home, they are moving on to the middle school, then moving on to the elementary schools. So we do not have extra buses to pick up kids for athletics. That's the reason it would be that way. Ryan, did I miss anything? Do you need anything else from us?
No, that's all I needed. That's all I have at this point in time. I'm assuming there's going to be another school committee meeting next Thursday.
Yeah, and one the week after, so we have plenty of times before your season actually starts if you need anything.
Yeah, so I mean, as you know, guidance is changing constantly, so I'll have an update, hopefully not nearly as long as this one next week, and if you guys need me to be here. Thank you so much for the support of what I feel is a really important program. Obviously, it's our athletic department, it's our athletic program, and I know kids and families are excited about getting back on the field and the playing surface. So it feels really good to have the support of the school committee and the community.
That's great, Ryan. And thanks for all you're doing. I know it's been a tough summer for you too, not only for running the programs at the high school, but just trying to figure out what you're going to be able to do and not able to do and stuff like that. So we appreciate it.
No problem. Looking forward to getting to work further and get it going.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lynch, I will go back to you.
Thank you. Well, that basically concludes my report, but I would like to pull Sarah Hickey up onto the stage perhaps and have her give just a quick update on what we know about the Champions program for the fall. And there's been a couple questions on there, and we're just sort of still working with them on how we're approaching this, but we have a little bit of an update. Ms. Hickey?
Thank you, Superintendent Lynch, Chairman Young, and school committee members for giving me the time to talk about Champions tonight. I've had several conversations with the Champion program over the past few weeks, and I saw that there were questions about, is Champions going to be running a program? And the answer to that is yes, they're going to be running their regular before and after school program in the buildings that they have run it in. I hope to get some literature out to families on that within the next few days. Also, I have had conversation with the Champions program about running a full day program at the MEC, and they have permission from the state to do that. So all we're waiting for to move forward on that is some information about square footage and number of students. And then as soon as we have official information about that, that will also be sent out to families.
Great. So that sounds fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. Any questions about that with the Champion program? So families will have an opportunity for an all day, provided whatever the guidelines are from the state.
Mm-hmm.
That's fantastic.
And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very, very much. The good news is we have nothing on consent agenda today. We have done everything for an action item. So with that, I will just add, as we said, as the superintendent mentioned, we have continued to negotiate with the teacher union and the cafeteria workers and the extra support personnel, and things have been moving along really nicely. And we are meeting again next week, and we will continue to do that. But I don't have anything else. Anyone have anything they want to bring up?
Can you suggest this question, right?
Ms. Farley.
I neglected to mention it earlier this evening, but I would like to do a quick shout out to one of our parents, Amy Dowler, had reached out to the community. As you all know, Mr. Brannigan is always going above and beyond. And this year was a little bit different with the Start Strong program. And obviously they're still trying to put that together, but there was no opportunity to raise any money for this program. So of course, Mr. Brannigan was talking about ways to get the t-shirts for the freshmen. And I personally have an incoming freshman. I know how important this program is. So Ms. Dowler had reached out to the community and raised a total of $2,300, which was presented to Mr. Brannigan on Monday for the t-shirts and for the Start Strong program. So I just wanted to thank her publicly and the entire community for, as always, coming together as we all do. So
Great stuff.
Before we close out, I do want to take a lot of time to thank the superintendent. It has been one of the more hectic weeks that I personally been involved with the school. And I know the extra time that he put in this week between meetings and working out to make sure that everything went smoothly and the needs that he and his administrative staff needed and those pieces to work out. So I do want to thank the superintendent for his service this week.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I defer to a hardworking group of administrators and support personnel. Even I'll give Sean a little credit too, please. Sean Siciliano.
Oh, Sean did have vacation last week, so he should be ready and raring to go.
Oh, thank you.
With that, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
I just found out that I do not have to do a roll call for adjournment unless there is a negative. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. We'll see you next week. Thank you, everybody.
thank you.